We're going to start by sort of looking at the liturgy itself of the burial office, with a particular eye on the theology that the burial office is communicating to us. The idea is, with that sort of background information, and that next week, Dr. Lucas will have a presentation on music. Then our third week, led by Dean Andy, will sort of be equipped to actually work through some of the planning of the funeral liturgy ourselves. So that's where we're going to start with today. I would invite you all to turn to page 507 in your prayer book to start with.
Michael. He's got to use up what it is. But we're
507. I will also have it up here on the screen. It's a cough drop, but thank you. As I mentioned, we are recording this theoretically. And it's all right, so we're on page 507 here. This is a little note that's just kind of buried in the back of the various funeral liturgies. Does someone want to read this out loud for us?
Sure. The liturgy for the dead is an Easter liturgy. It finds all meaning in the resurrection. Because Jesus was raised from the dead, we too shall be raised. The liturgy, therefore, is characterized by joy and certainty that neither death nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus our Lord. This joy, however, does not make human Christian. The very love we have for each other in Christ brings deep sorrow when we are parted by death. Jesus himself wept at the grave of his friend. So while we rejoice that one we love has entered into a near presence of our Lord, we sorrow and sympathy with those who mourn.
Thank you. So what stands out to you in that?
And it's an Easter liturgy.
Yeah, so right away we're defining this as an Easter liturgy.
And joy.
Joy. Yeah, so what does that mean to be an Easter liturgy? What do you think?
Resurrection, we'll be resurrected.
Yeah. So we're connecting it to whose resurrection?
Right.
Jesus, yeah, Jesus Christ, right? That's what we celebrate at Easter. And so we're saying that the liturgy for the dead is a liturgy celebrating the resurrection of Jesus Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's interesting. What else? What else you notice?
I have a disagreement.
Oh, really?
I knew you would. That's why I wanted you to be here. Yeah, that's the real fun of this, is you get to see us argue.
Well, it's not argument with you.
Oh, okay.
It's the prayer.
Well, I am, a defender of the prayer book, so.
I'm a huge defender of the prayer book, but I disagree with this one line.
That's one line with the type.
Why don't you always say?
Yeah, that's to be seen.
What I don't like is where it says, there's still grief and sorrow. We're sorrowing when we're parted by death. Yes, absolutely. But then it says Jesus himself wept at the grave of his friend. And I was always taught through New Testament that Jesus was not weeping because he was sad that Lazarus had died. Because he knew what was going to happen. He knew he was going to raise Lazarus from the dead. Jesus wept because of the unbelief of the people who were there. His sorrow was at their unbelief, not about his friend having died. So that to me is misplaced.
Okay.
Not bad.
And again, to back that up, because earlier on, when he finds out that Lazarus has died, remember, he doesn't go.
Everyone hears that Lazarus is sick, right?
He's sick, and he
delays. He delays, yeah.
Because he knows what's going to happen. And the disciples are like, well, you said Lazarus was sleeping. And Jesus is like, he's dead.
So that's what stands out to Dean Andy, this misplacing. What else stands out?
Well, it's a little different than Dean Andy, and he's the dean, he's right. But I always thought he was weeping for the grief that Mary and Martha had.
Well, I would agree with some of that. Yeah.
And Lazarus is people that loved him and that they thought he was gone, and also maybe their lack of faith.
Right, but that would play into that, to the lack of faith.
Yeah.
That means so.
But there wasn't a whole lot to go on at that time about what happened after death. You know, it wasn't like you could say, well, look at these 16 cases where people came back, you know. You didn't have that. And
That Dead Sea Scroll hasn't been found.
Oh, okay. But I mean, I've gone to funerals where I barely knew the people. I went because of someone else, but seeing the families grief and meeting tears as well.
Sure.
Just because I could see how much loss they were suffering.
What else? So we have an Easter liturgy. We have Jesus weeping at the grave of his friend for some reason. What else? What else do you notice here?
Well, he's asking us to rejoice that our loved one has gotten near to the presence of the Lord, even though we're mourning.
Yeah. So there's two emotions being held up here, right? Or two orientations, or, you know, whatever word you want to use. What are they?
Grief and joy.
Grief and joy. Yeah. Both, right? And we tend to think of those as generally, yeah, opposing feelings. Yeah. So it's interesting that we're going to hold them both up here.
I do like that, the quotation from Paul. That's one of the very office readings, or one of the suggested readings.
Yeah.
I think it's very powerful words that I guess in a life and rituals, etc. That's where a lot of the joy comes from, is that we can't accelerate it.
Yeah, it's like the old country western song. I don't know if it's country western, but everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die.
yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's country.
But really, I mean, sometimes we're relieved when the people we love are no longer in pain or in suffering, and we know they're with God, and yet they aren't in our life anymore. And so selfishly and humanly, we grieve that they're not with us. I mean, we want it both ways.
But you don't feel that joy, right? I mean, that's the thing. Like, you know, through over time, you do move into that acceptance, you know, like the 5 stages of grief and everything else like that. Because I mean, it's true, you know, you should be happy that there's no pain, there's no suffering, there's no anything. But in that moment, that's not what you're thinking about. You know, you're not, oh, thank God they're dead, so they're not suffering anymore. It's like, so I mean, but eventually, yeah, like you move into that, but until you sit there, you get angry, you plead, you cry, you get depressed.
I prayed, cry, do it. I prayed for my grandmother to pass because she was in such ministry. I prayed, I told God, this is not fair. that she's suffering like this. And so I was thankful. I was thankful when she rescued.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean,
And it's 30 years ago, and I still cry.
yeah, of course you do. Yeah, that grief is still right. The sorrow and the joy are there today for you as they were then, right?
I'd like to say something to that, Nick and James. I don't know your progression line, so I'm sure you're going to get to this. But looking at the prayer, we have all sorts of liturgies and services leading up to this point to prepare us for this point. It's never going to completely make this, but it can lessen that. It can bring you to the joy faster because you've been doing this mature. And I know that James wants something to say.
Yeah, we talk about joy. We're talking about joy of people being left here on earth. But our granddaughter had a really good analogy. She's 11 years old, and she said, Grandma, when people die, people who are left here on earth are very sad. Grieved, they're very, very sad. But she said, those who go to heaven are really happy because they get to see everybody they were seeing. And if they're older, then they get to be younger. Yeah. She didn't even relate the fact that at some point we'll be happy too, but her happiness was people going to heaven.
What about a sudden, unexpected death? A younger person.
Yeah.
That makes it a different emotion.
Oh, yeah, certainly. I mean, there's a tension between joy and sorrow that the liturgy is trying to hold together, but depending on the circumstances, it might be one or the other that is most prominent. And in many ways, in those cases, what the liturgy then is doing is supporting that main feeling while also still creating the room for the opposite. Yeah, it's in many ways, the whole thing is this balancing act of these two emotions. Yeah.
I think the emotion it doesn't address, and I think exists, as guilt. I've had kids come back from Nam were my kids' age. I've known them ever since first grade, and they ended their own life. I had a close friend who ended her life. I never saw that coming. I never saw it coming. And I kept thinking for the longest time, with my educational background in psychology, I should have seen that. I should have seen that. I should have done something. Took me a very long time to just realize that I couldn't go to the depth that they had been to that caused depression and death. But I think guilt for those of us that remain many times. Why didn't I go see Granny before she died? Why didn't I help my brother? Why didn't I? And I think guilt's a real thing that people deal with at the time of the death.
Yeah. I think there's some ways as we go through this, we can maybe keep an eye out for ways that we can address that maybe.
I think I'm over it now, but that doesn't mean we all are.
So there's joy, there's loss. We're celebrating them entering into their joy in being in the near presence of Jesus, and we're mourning our loss. Maybe not as Jesus mourned his friend. Well,
I mean, I have to imagine, not sort of in the Bible study, but I have to imagine Lazarus was probably in a good amount of pain. Like, even he could have mourned that his friend had to go through pain, the pain of dying. He still had to experience that, even if you're reanimated. Like, you're going to feel that. Anyway, keep going.
Yeah, I'm not going to dig any deeper into that.
It was only dead for 40.
That's
He's begun to smell.
All right, so let's jump ahead to page 490 now. So I will just say a word that we, of course, have two rites for the burial of the dead, Rite 1 and Rite 2. Tonight we'll mostly look at Rite 2 in terms of looking through all of this. They're largely the same in format. Rite 1, of course, uses more traditional language, which families often will find more comforting, particularly with a funeral, because there's something about that tradition that you can lean on, that this reminder that you're not the first person to go through this, that generations of Christians before you have buried their dead, and we have this long history of support around that. But either form is appropriate. Dean, I don't know if you have any thoughts on the differences between Rite 1 and Rite 2 before we dive into Rite 2 here.
I find Rite 1 to be fuller. It's a richer liturgy to me than the Rite 2 liturgy is, in specifically the burial office. And though they go through the same things.
Yeah.
But one thing that we've started doing here, I really don't like the prayers of the people in Rite 2.
Yeah.
They're sort of short and sort of dippy in my mind. And I really like the Rite 1 prayers. So, but we have started using the Rite 1 prayers, but in Rite 2 language, which expands it a little bit, which I really enjoy.
Yeah. So that'll be something to keep in mind
Yeah.
as we go forward, that there's always like that.
Biggest difference.
Yeah.
But also all the additional prayers you could put in, but you can do that in either. Rite.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
those are nice too.
Okay. So we're on page 490, and we're looking at what's called the rubrics here for the Rite 2 service. So the rubrics are generally within the liturgies. They're the thing that's in italics. On 490, it's not in italics because it's not embedded within the service. The reason it's called rubrics is because in the earlier prayer books, it was actually printed in red. And so it was like, these are the red bits, which are right? So the red bits are the instructions on what to do. And then the black bit is the parts that you say. Those are the prayers that you actually speak. So that's just a little context on why we're calling these rubrics. All right, so let's look through these rubrics here, though. So these might at first seem mundane to you, just like details for us as priests to worry about, but they actually provide some really important insights into the symbolic meaning of what we're doing and what we're expressing about our beliefs around death. So what is our first note there, that first paragraph on 490? Somebody want to read that?
Sure, Robert.
Thank you.
Just
that first paragraph.
Okay. The death of a member of the church should be reported as soon as possible to, and arrangements made for the funeral should be made in consultation with the minister of the congregation.
Okay, so when should the minister of the congregation be made aware of a death?
See?
Right.
As soon
as possible. Okay, let's all make sure that's let's all make sure that's written somewhere, right?
You need to wait until they're going to the receiving.
Yeah.
They're leaving on Sunday.
First shows up at the church.
Yeah. Okay? So let's then look at the second note there. Someone want to read the second paragraph? Thank you.
Baptized Christians are properly buried from the church. The service should be held at a time when the congregation has the opportunity to be present.
Yeah. Okay, so what are we saying here in these first two paragraphs? When a member of the church dies, the minister of the church should be made aware of that as soon as possible. And where should they be buried from? The church. Who should be involved in that? The congregation. So what are we saying there?
That right after you tell the priest notifies the congregation that they've lost them.
Yeah. Why? Why is that important?
They can be there.
Yeah,
So we can support the people that remain.
exactly. Yeah. So they're not facing death alone, right? The congregation, their church family is there to support them, right?
Community of the church can.
Exactly. Yeah.
Unless you're going through COVID, right, Andy?
Pandemics
Yeah.
this up a little bit.
Yeah, these rubrics were not, keeping things like that in mind.
But it all worked out anyway.
There was sometimes postponement is okay.
You know how it was, but what was so great was we did have a funeral.
Yep.
Right after, and it was by an Episcopal priest that had left Grace Holy, whose name I can't remember right now. Italian? Is he Italian?
Oh, Marco.
Oh, okay.
So he was in Lawrence, and I used a mortuary in Lawrence, and he facilitated.
Yep.
It was great. It was just great. But then we had a celebration of life 16 months later. So
Yeah.
exit to go with.
Yeah.
So, but that's okay. I mean, it all still was as it should.
Yeah.
I say, yeah.
Yeah. Let's see.
And yeah, to your point, the idea that because we are a parish family who worship together, who receive the Eucharist together, who baptize children together, that burial ought to be together as well. You say,
Yeah. The other note here is sort of, it's not only location based, but notice that it doesn't just say members are properly buried from the church. Who is it say is properly buried from the church? Right, which is a more expansive definition, right? And members, right? There's not a criteria of of giving, of attending, of anything, right? It's the witness here is that the church is the sort of the location for anyone who has been baptized to be buried out of. And we'll see the kind of the symbolism in mind there as we look at how that moves.
Does that exclude people that haven't been baptized?
So we have a different liturgy for non-Christians. It's really, historically speaking, it's really interesting the way that the church very early on became known as the people who would bury the dead. Because in the Roman Empire, a proper funeral was expensive. You paid people to give eulogies to honor the dead. You paid for private burial plots. You might sponsor gladiatorial games in their honor, right? So the rich were really well celebrated in their death, and the poor were largely just dumped into mass graves. And so Christians became known as the people who would bury the dead for free, the poor for free. And so I think it's really important that we maintain that witness today. The liturgy we're looking at here is specifically the Christian burial, but there is a liturgy for non-Christians as well, as a more expansive service.
That's not what it's called.
What for one who does? Is it burial for one who does?
Who does not profess the Christian faith.
Yeah.
Great. Is that like at the heading of your?
That's what we put on the bulletins, and yeah.
Of course, we.
Who does not profess the Christian faith.
I think it's something. Yeah, it's something like that. Yeah.
Wow.
What if they do practice every other aspect of Christianity and they consider themselves to be, you know, Christian member of the Christian church? They just have never received baptism.
I'm not going there. Ask me that later. Yeah, that's a rabbit hole. I cannot go down to that.
Well, like there is the historical precedence of people being baptized on their deathbed.
Oh,
There is that too, yeah. So the idea here is that the church is here to welcome you home into the arms of Christ, no matter what. That's the idea here. Right. So one of the responsibilities of Christian community is to bear one another's burdens. So that's the idea behind having the congregation be available. So you'll see our third paragraph then has a rubric, a direction, instructions about the coffin. So it says that the coffin is to be closed before the service and remains closed thereafter. So once it's closed, we're not going to open it back up. I've learned that the hard way. We won't go into it though. There is a story there though. And we cover it with a pall. So we cover it with a white garment. Any thoughts on why we do that?
is that different than a shroud?
I think I tend to think of the shroud as for the body,
Oh, okay.
where the pall goes over the coffin.
But it's the same idea. With what you're gonna have to say.
Is it supposed to represent like your baptismal garment?
Yeah, particularly, so the pall is representing it's white, like the baptismal garment. It's representing you being covered by Christ, right? Clothed by Christ. It also means that we don't see how nice of a coffin you have.
Oh,
You could have a really fancy coffin. You could have a cardboard box. In the church, it all looks the same.
now if we have ashes in an urn, do we cover those in the same way with the casket?
We do. Yeah. Yes, we do. So however fancy your urn is, similarly covered.
I think mine will say Amazon.
It's a pall, but it's also mirrors what we do in the Eucharist. Because it's a pall that covers
Oh, right.
the
Yeah.
body of Christ.
Yeah, cool.
So why do we, so we have the coffin open for like,
Yeah. So if there's a visitation or whatever, yeah.
so what's the purpose? I mean, why do we close it then for the service and everything else as opposed to just
Leaving it open. Yeah.
I mean, you get the pall to cover it so you can't see how nice, everything like that is. But I mean,
Yeah.
if you have it open for the procession line to see and say goodbye to.
Yeah. So on one hand, it is, again, if we're going to cover the whole thing, then practically speaking, you need it closed to cover it. But there is also there's a sense in which a lot of what we're doing throughout the funeral liturgy is we are accompanying this person to their final resting place. And we're helping through the support of the liturgy and our prayers and our gathering together, we're helping the bereaved move through that process of caring for the remains of their loved one through steps, through a process. So we'll have, if we're going to have a viewing, we'll have it beforehand. And then we're going to start the process, we're going to close it, but we're not going to move things, right? And we're going to sort of support them through that part of it. Then we're going to have a commendation where we say more prayers before sending it out of the church. And then we're going to gather at the final resting place, and we're going to have more prayers before we lower it down into the ground together and have our sort of final prayers as we leave them then in the care of God in their final resting place. So there's this sort of these stages that we're moving through, that which is, not to go too deep into my story, but when you close the casket and then the funeral home convinces you to open it back up so everyone can see their fine work one final time, you disrupt that process, because now they have to say goodbye all over again by closing the casket without the support of those prayers and the liturgy to carry them through it anymore. Yeah.
This probably, this may be a little off the subject, but this is something my mom told me years ago when my grandmother passed it. You close the casket before the service, and then there's been services where they've had it open and people come and they just start bawling and crying, and it's just they just can't. They just have tears. Or if you feel it before, obviously there's sadness, but you close it, it seems like a smoother deal.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. Yeah, there's an emotional journey being made.
It's like a ritual.
Yeah, no, it's 100% what it is.
Totally.
Yeah.
We just, leave it open.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that's not done.
So James,
Yeah.
is there a version of this that the coffin wouldn't be present at the service?
Yeah. So when there's no coffin, we have a memorial service instead.
Yeah.
And it changes some of the liturgy and the wording, because, right, if much of this is about that care for the body and moving it through these stages, if there's no body, that loses its meaning. And so
You don't need those.
yeah, so it changes because of that. Yeah.
So the same, you'd have a memorial if you didn't have the ashes there.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, when I talk about the body, I mean the remains in any form.
Okay.
Yeah. So then we have from there notes on the various roles. It also says in here, I think it's in here. Yeah, it is customary that the celebrant meet the body and go before it into the church or towards the grave. So the idea here, right, is as the body is brought into the church from wherever it was prepared from the funeral home, that's actually where the liturgy starts, right? So that the priest, the celebrant, meets the body there and begins that accompanying into the church to then accompany it out of the church. You see how there's a flow there?
Are you meaning at the gates or at the funeral?
This would be here, like at the door here. Right. So what we're saying here is that the person who's died is not traveling alone, right? Even in death, they're not traveling alone. The saints who have gone before them are there with them. Jesus himself led the way, right, through the gates of death.
Yeah.
So do you bring the ashes then? So there's, when you walk in, does somebody carry the ashes and put them at the front of the church?
Yeah.
Or are they already up there?
I mean, it depends on how we put it together. What this rubric and the prayer book envisions is doing exactly that. Is you bring it in, you say the prayers, and you move it up to the front of the church.
Okay.
It's a little, well, the way we do it here, that is still done, and it can be done. But if they're being interred here, the more gardens, there's a little thing called the transfer of ashes to the box that we use to pour it into the garden. So we have to take it to transfer it, and then we can bring it into the church, or have it carried into the church.
So the transfer doesn't matter. You're going to transfer it.
Yeah, if they're going to be buried here,
We transfer it.
yeah. Okay, so now we're turning to the actual liturgy itself. So we've looked at all this preliminary stuff about it. So we start with a procession where everyone stands and an anthem is said or sung. I am the resurrection and I am the life, says the Lord. And then from there, right, so that's 491. In many ways, it then feels a lot like a normal Sunday service. You have, the Lord be with you, let us pray, an appropriate collect for the burial. You will notice, speaking of untimely death, on 494, we do have a collect for the burial of a child. These prayers focus on the reality of grief. And then we have various options here for Old Testament and New Testament readings and gospel reading, as well as psalms and hymns. These readings all are focused on the joy of resurrection, while giving comfort to those who mourn. In all of these, the focus is on the presence of God. We know and proclaim that there's nowhere we can go that Jesus has not already been, not even to death in the grave. That's the message we are pronouncing in this liturgy. After the readings, there may be a homily. Notice it says a homily. Not a eulogy.
It's 50.
What do you guys think about that?
So you don't do eulogy.
I don't.
So, I mean, you don't have someone from the audience come up and
there's a pastoral case to be made that if there's a strong desire to do a eulogy, that you fit it in here, it would go before the homily if you did that. The homily has the final word. With that said, the liturgy, the prayer book, does not envision a eulogy here. So, we're using homily, eulogy. When I say eulogy, what do you think of?
Think of somebody who does some remembrance of a family member or friend.
Yeah.
So it's telling stories.
Telling stories, yeah.
But even when we allow for that, we don't call it a eulogy. Call it family remarks.
Yeah.
Okay. And we tell them to keep it brief. You should tell stories. That's for a later time.
So, is there the church have a theological reason or purpose for not having eulogy?
Yeah. So traditionally, the point what a eulogy is it's a celebration of that person and their life.
Right.
A homily is about the gospel. So those are two different emphases, right? Now, a good homily at a funeral will incorporate the witness of the deceased, if the preacher knows them or has enough context in order to do so. Yeah. So the emphasis though is on the gospel and the way in which the deceased serves as a witness to the gospel. That's the thrust of a homily versus just celebrating them for he got that 300 in bowling and that was just such a great day.
Or Anthony did a eulogy that worked out so well for him.
We're not really friends, we know each other as a minister, and he's African American and very much in the gospel African American Baptist church. And every homily he gives at a funeral, and I've been to a number of those, he gives a sermon on adultery. What? Adultery. The first time I thought, oh my God, is Miss Francis? Was she? And she wasn't. That's just what Tony preaches for every funeral.
I think I like this liturgy better.
Jane, we're in the rubrics doesn't say to talk about.
Yeah, I have to say I've never referenced adultery in a funeral homily.
They say they,
But honestly, I bet I'd forget just dozen funerals because I used to be really well connected with our Black population in Liberty. And Tony never failed to talk about the sin of adultery.
Wow.
So I thought, I know what y'all are doing.
To your,
is it an old English tradition to not have a homily? Well, the reason I'm asking is my father was an old Englishman,
Oh.
and he really did not like it that he got up and eulogized the scene. Would say you got to set up. He just didn't like it.
Oh. I don't know.
So I wanted to just go back to Henry. And
Well, I would say the minister leading the service, when there are scripture readings done, always has the right to speak on those readings. And in a context of a burial office, it's going to be the resurrection. So you want someone to speak to it. To James's point, another issue with the eulogy is that everyone has a different idea of what that is. And so when I gave it as family remarks, it's to say, you're welcome to get up and share something about the person. That's fine, because we're in a public context where we can do that, but you want to keep it brief. It's not for someone to get up there and go on for an hour about this and the other thing. Because the other thing it does is it also disrupts what we're doing in the liturgy.
And it's that other thing where they invite lots of people to come up.
Yes.
It's not an open mic.
Yeah, it's not that.
It was embarrassing.
That's again for the bar.
Yeah, that's when you start. We got a challenge.
Yeah.
So we're connecting the person's life with the gospel. That's the goal. Then we do the Apostles' Creed. May include the Apostles' Creed. Does give us the option.
Which again, it says like it mentions baptism right before the Apostles' Creed.
Yeah.
So reminding us.
So, and eternal life. Yeah.
I guess when I first glanced at it, I assumed it was the baptismal covenant, which hits a lot of the same points.
Yeah. So at this point, our liturgy then can take one of two paths. So we can not have the Eucharist, in which case we do the Lord's Prayer, prayers of the people, and then sort of wrap up. Or we have communion. We have a Eucharist service. When you're thinking about those options, the reason why we might not have communion is usually has to do with family dynamics, right? Where if including communion would create a more divisive environment than not including it, interreligious, Catholic, not Catholic, those sorts of things that would create a sense of division. It might be best to not do communion, to not, sort of foment up all that kind of stuff. Otherwise, though, what I always point out is that communion itself is this really powerful and important reminder that we in communion are joined together with angels and archangels, the saints before us, and our beloved dead. That, right, if we're right there at the altar of God, where God is, then the dead are there too. Every Sunday, the dead are there with us. And so having communion at the funeral can be this really powerful reminder of the reality of our connection to our beloved dead in communion. So I'll just let you keep that in mind as you do your own planning. Any thoughts on that, or questions or reflections? Kind of
What, how long does a funeral liturgy, how long does it usually take, time-wise?
I mean, it's not really much longer than I mean, it depends on how much music you have,
The reading.
how long the readings are, how eloquent the homilist is.
Listen,
Typically, with communion, about an hour. Is an hour. Without communion, it'll be a little short.
It's a lot like Sunday morning, which I find comforting because it's like I don't have to be like, what's going to happen next? It's like it can follow the rhythm.
There's a rhythm to it that you can trust it and let carry you.
How, like when we talk about like low and high church, no, we really break things out for stuff like, is there a traditional way in which we do that, or is it all just decided with the family and how they want to approach?
Yeah, it's decided in sort of consultation with the minister, the family, the wishes of the deceased, and what's available in terms of resources.
Yeah,
And
that's who's available.
and who's available, yeah.
anything with communion, as an usher at those things, it's often, it's funny the reaction of some of the people who don't want to take communion and they're looking embarrassed. Or actually tell the usher they're not.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Dean Andy's on sabbatical this year for 2 or 3 months, so you need to put that in your schedule.
Yeah, nobody thing I'll say when I preached the last time before I got sabbatical, it's that nobody is allowed to die.
One to my accused.
Okay. I'll be in the Calvary job.
And if you do die, just realize you're getting James.
That's what Bill's from.
No, it's not.
Just dusty enough.
So if we jump ahead to page 499, so this would be after the Eucharist, if we have the Eucharist. We then have the commendation. So at this point, the celebrant and the other ministers take their place at the body, right? So they've been up at the altar. Now they're going to come back right by the body or the remains. And it, right, as the word commendation implies, right, we're commending them to God at this point, right? So this next stage we're taking, right? We've brought them into the church. We've had our prayers. And now we're sending them out and commending them into the care of God. So that's what the prayers themselves center around here, right?
This is one of the things you leave out. You skip if there's not a lot.
Yeah.
Or not. So you have nothing.
Yeah. All right. So you'll see there, right? Into your hands, O merciful Savior, we commend your servant, right? We're handing them over to God. We're affirming our own belief in God. And we name the deceased's identity here, right? So acknowledge, we humbly beseech you, a sheep of your own fold, a lamb of your own flock, a sinner of your own redeeming. Right? So this is who they are, right? This encompasses who all of us are in the eyes of God, right? Servant, sheep, lamb, sinner, redeemed, saint.
Nobody's ever called me that.
We know.
I like it.
The deceased was not perfect, but they're beloved by God. That's what we're saying. Just as we all are. So then there's a blessing, and again, we have this anthem. We sing them out of the church, right? We sing them in, we sing them out. And it ends as it began. We affirm Jesus Christ, who leads each of us through death and the grave into paradise.
It's interesting, that choice of wording, the service ends as it begins, just kind of like they say the same thing. You will end as you begin. So you have to think you will go.
So that's the service in the church at that point. But of course, the burial itself hasn't happened yet. So our final portion, you'll find on page 501, is the committal. And so this is the part where we say prayers or the body of the deceased and place them in their final resting place. This is the quote unquote graveside service. I think it's brief. I think it's often shorter than some people expect when they request a graveside service. Because it's just a couple of prayers.
I think that's when everyone's so emotionally exhausted.
Yeah.
You're outside most of the time. It's take a breath. Goodbye.
Yeah.
Check you later.
And there's a ritual embodiment happening here. If we think just anthropologically about death, right? There's a body that has to be dealt with when someone dies. And so we're dealing with the body in this very ritualistic way, and we're putting it in its final resting place, and we're doing it, right? The church, the family, those who remain behind are the ones taking care of the body here, which is it's becoming more and more countercultural. Right? We've professionalized death immensely at this point. You think back just a couple of generations and most people died at home, right?
Yeah.
That's much rarer now. I feel like I'm fighting with funeral homes all the time about over sanitizing the burial itself, right? So if there's a body being lowered into the ground, right? One of the ritual actions envisioned here is that everyone takes dirt into their hand and pours it into the grave. What is it? What are you doing by doing that?
Dust to dust, I guess.
So there's a reminder here of the fact that we're all made of dust and we're returning dust. What does it mean for you to be the one to put the dirt into the grave?
The community is actually sending off their.
Yeah. You're with your own hands, right? You're commending them into their final resting place.
It's an act of mercy.
Yeah.
It's like they can't take care of their own body, obviously. Somebody else has to. And obviously, you mentioned it's professionalized, but you see it in movies all the time. Somebody digging the grave for their friend,
Yeah.
Like how powerful that is. That's the last thing they could do for that person. And obviously, for the most part, we don't do that anymore, but symbolically, we can do that.
Exactly.
Well, and the other problem is most cemeteries these days don't even lower the.
That's
Don't let you stay for that. They make everyone leave and then they do it.
That's the fight I have with them all the time.
None.
Because it's top secret.
My father wanted to be cremated,
Yeah.
and he died the day before his 59th birthday. So he died. He didn't want any service at all. And so my two half sisters and mine, and their husbands, did exactly what he wanted. We sprinkled his ashes on his father's grave. And it was hideous. It was just horrible. There was no, I got to go on, the ashes are back.
Yeah.
When we drive there, and I drove down all of myself, crying all the way, I think. But it was terrible not to even have a prayer with someone. And after that experience, I absolutely know the importance of the rituals, of the prayers, of the structure of saying goodbye. Yeah. Because it was just, I still have trouble going to the cemetery.
Yeah.
Because I know Daddy's just, I'm going to be in the ground, dust to death, but he just wanted his ashes poured out his father's grave.
Yeah, I mean, there's generations of wisdom in this, right? Of lived experience of how to move through grief and how to say goodbye. That we are the benefactors of as.
We cut open a plastic bag.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cut open a plastic bag. That was it.
Yeah.
Something that I was always told, because when my mother died, we had some family disagreements on how to handle everything. But,
Yeah.
And she had some wants and some wishes when it came to things and stuff like that too. So like trying to honor that while simultaneously trying to kind of honor other people's feelings and stuff like that too. It's important to put like what they want and everything into consideration, but at the same time, funeral services aren't for the dead, they're for the living. It's a way for you to process what you need to process and everything else like that too. And so while we couldn't honor everything, but we also had to find a way to set things up that would allow people to feel comfortable, allow them to grieve, allow them to feel what they needed to feel in those moments. Kind of what that's how don't talk. But
Just threaten the people that you think have caused the stir after you're gone. You dare haunt you.
What does the Episcopal Church feel about like agreeing over in Founders Hall and showing pictures and videos? How does the church feel about that after the service? Where people gather and have food and
Oh yeah.
Is that?
Oh yeah. I mean, that's more than appropriate. Yeah. And in many ways, that's sort of the other piece to the grieving process is that there is an important place for that sharing of stories and remembering and all that stuff. It's just, its place is there, not in the middle of the liturgy, the burial liturgy, because it's like we got a job to do in the liturgy. But it's not that you shouldn't talk about the dead or anything like that. No.
People are going to be one to hear your story a lot more if they can have a sandwich and coffee and all that. Fear. It's like, that's the other thing. It's just practical. It's like if you're sitting around telling stories, that's the right place to do that.
Yeah.
Where you're comfortable.
And we do all that. We have the projector available for the slideshows are run on the wall, music we played, and all that.
I learned more about my mother-in-law after she was people came from California, people came from New Jersey. The church, there were people inside just listening to her funeral through the door. She was beloved. And but back at the house, oh my word, the stories they told me and I had no trouble believing any of them because she just was one of the forces for life. And it was a wonderful time. So it's amazing how much that can help people too. The kids hear about their books when they get to share what was important.
Yeah.
I think that's really important.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I do want to point out again that the final words of this service are the words of Easter, right? Hallelujah, Christ is risen, the Lord is risen indeed. Hallelujah. Even if it's in Lent, right? It's Easter anyway, even in the middle of Lent, when it comes to the burial office.
Get what I add to that?
Yeah.
You get a sneak of that tip of it at the commendation when you said, you know, even at the grave, we make our song.
Yeah, exactly.
So I've got kind of a practical question. That's our church here in downtown Kansas City. We go through this process and load up and head out to the burial site. That's the way I speak.
I mean, it is what we do, yeah.
I have trouble visualizing, you know, it might be a 30-mile trek.
Yeah.
And it seems like a long way for a funeral procession to go.
I've done them.
That you would do that, that would be kind of the average, kind of in this church with, unless they're being married.
That's the way we're here.
Right.
Sometimes people will do the burial on a separate day.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's kind of what
And then
we've
stay.
been having those discussions.
Yeah.
That's kind
I
of,
rode in a verse from here to Fort Leavenworth to do a burial.
My mom was buried in southern Missouri, down by Carthage. That's a long,
Yeah.
because that was the family.
did you do a funeral procession from here?
People came, stop.
They came.
Yeah. I mean, generally, right, if it's far enough away, it's just we're gonna meet up there, and it's not necessarily gonna be, you know,
I think the procession like ends once you get onto like a main site, like if you're on the highway, you're not.
I mean, I went down 71.
You're still in procession.
Yeah.
Back in the day, all the other cars would stop. So you went by and you don't.
Don't see that as much anymore.
See it more like in the city, or Texas, like driving on trips.
You also usually have a police escort too when you're doing that.
And you've got a person that, so that kind of tells them it's kind of. I do have a question about that. When you have a long procession like that, do you pay the police department or services?
That's to the funeral home, isn't it? Don't they arrange it?
They arrange it. That's something
That's
that,
part of
at least in the way it used to be, that the police offer as their service.
So,
That was something that they gave. And there's usually two of them who will go tandem and lead it, yeah. And depending on where it is and how long it is.
My brother was a funeral escort, and it's usually the funeral homes that call the company. So he did it for 30, 40 years.
So again, we've got this tension that we're balancing between joy and grief. We're also being reminded in the funeral that we are surrounded by the church to support us in our grief. One thing I commend all of you to do as a church family is when there is a funeral, pick a date on the calendar, weeks, couple months, put on there, reach out and call the bereaved and check in on them, right? Because we tend to do really well day of and right around it, but then as time kind of goes on, you know, we don't have the same structures to continue to support the bereaved. I think also we don't know what to say to the bereaved. It can feel awkward, it can feel sad, and you just don't know what to say. My hint to you there is what you say is really not that important. So be present, listen more than you speak. Those are kind of my tips to providing support to the bereaved.
and I would say as a tip, it's really important if they want to talk about the deceased, to talk about the deceased with them. And so it's like everybody forgot her the minute she was dead.
Yeah.
We talk about her. She wasn't, and it's like, no, this was been my whole life, or for 20 years or whatever. It's important that they be able to talk and that you laugh and share ideas and thoughts. It's all good.
I stopped eating after my mom because I thought that if I started eating again or whatever, that was like a way of like just minimalizing and just moving on. Yeah. And so I just stopped. Somebody finally shut brain.
What's between cremation and burial? What's about the ratio? That's a good word to use.
like in terms of
How many?
what's more common. So historically, Christians favored the burial of a body. That was largely because it contrasted really nicely with the pagans who did cremation, and so it was a way to distinguish themselves from the pagans. And the sort of theology behind it was creation is good, the body is good, right? We often think of ancient Christians as being, really like against the body and, real prim and proper. But our theology has always been that the body is created by God and so is good. Whereas for the pagans, it was like, they're dead and gone, we're just gonna get rid of the body. So that's kind of the historical precedent. At this point, though, I mean, we don't have a lot of pagan Romans that we need to differentiate ourselves from anymore. I think there's a couple out there on the internet, but like, you can find them if you look for them. So like, that's not really as important for us anymore. And, just there's more practical considerations that weigh over things like that now in terms of cost and space availability and also just the scheduling. It's much easier to schedule things if you don't have a body you need to take care of quickly. So all that said, it's a really long answer to your question, but I can't resist a historical context when I can provide it. Cremation's becoming more and more common.
I would say in England, it's about 95% cremation.
Really?
Steve is asking, is the funeral required?
Required for what?
This said.
But required for what, Steve?
Listen, since you may have I was wondering, funeral service is not required in way, shape, or form. That's not getting to heaven, right?
Correct. Yeah. So it's not, this isn't the ticket you pay to get into heaven. It is largely for the living, mostly in terms of shepherding them through the grieving process. With that said, I don't want to say that it doesn't matter for the deceased, right? Because we are praying for them, and we believe that our prayers are efficacious. We don't need to quantify that, though, in terms of, what does it get you? Other than, the love and support that people praying for you provided you in life as well.
You think about the people that died in wars, died at sea, and all of these across the country in a wagon, no real funerals.
Yeah. But God remembers them anyway.
I just wanted to say, I'm sorry about a second. Nigel, to your question, I find, at least in the 23 years that I've been ordained, way more cremations than when I started, a lot more. burials, coffins. That's not as much selected.
When his dad died, was when his child like they had a visitation with the casket, his body, and everything, which was freaked out his grandchildren. And then after the funeral and everything, it was cremated. Like, why go through all of that? It's expensive. This is crazy.
That's the way I used to do it. That's why.
Yeah.
Well, and I can tell you, there is, and I don't mean to interrupt the last bit here, but
Go ahead.
there is one of the many books that we have, the Missional, handbook of priest or whatever it is, that there when a priest dies, there are other rituals that can help a priest or a bishop or a deacon for them to where, you're buried in your vestments, and there's all the stuff that surrounds the closing of the coffin, the prayers and the incense and blah, 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 blah. And I've often thought that, I want that ritual of doing that, having the casket, so renting a casket for the funeral, they can have that ritual.
They can sing.
Yeah, and then being committed. Yeah, sure.
So that does remind me of another sort of ritual around that I think is really interesting, that you would not be able to do if you were cremated. But traditionally, if you were buried bodily, you would be buried facing the east, right? So you're buried facing sunrise, and the symbolism there, right? The new day, the sun rising on the day of the resurrection, right? The idea is Jesus is going to come from the east, and so as you're bodily raised, you'll be facing the new creation in Jesus. Priests are buried facing the west, not the east.
Oh, really?
And the symbolism there is when the priest arrives on the day of resurrection, they will behold their work, right? The people who they shepherded. And so they're looking towards the people.
It's interesting.
Interesting.
I know.
The Orthodox Christian Church that officially doesn't allow cremation.
Yeah, they hold on to that older
They hang
thing I
on
was talking
to
about.
the
Yeah.
People that have the service, have the whole funeral service and everything, and then sort of slip them out to the crematorium. This way.
That's how we did my mom's race. So we started off with, we rented the casket, we did the visitation, we did the procession line, the whole, yada, yada, yada thing. And then afterwards, there was no the first and procession and everything else. We watched processed out, the group was there, we watched them load it into the hearse, and then the hearse drove off. End of day. That was all.
When they do that, do they embalm the body?
Yes. So, well, it depends. Yes and no. So, you can. It seems like they can do it without embalm. I think it depends on the method in which they cut it, or like how long the healing still is out. My mother, she was embalmed, and so they did embalm her. Of course, that costs extra. And so, and then we did all of that. But that also came down to the day because I'm the oldest of siblings. My mother wasn't married, so I was her next of kin. So everything that got decided went through me. However, her parents are still alive. They don't go to them, they go to the eldest son. And so one of the things that there was disagreements about was the funeral service. And so in order to appease both sides, because my mother wanted cremation, whereas my grandparents, being from that generation, didn't really, I don't want to say believe in cremation, it just wasn't what you did. Yeah. And so we bring in the casket, we did the embalming, did all of that stuff, everything else to appease basically that side of the aisle. And then
I had no idea you could rent a coffin.
oh yeah.
Yeah, maybe you can rent a urn or something.
Yeah. Although again, we're just going to cover it, so.
Look good. It's Amazon. Brings it.
Yep.
I think that all the comments about you know, maybe families don't know what to do, or if there's disagreement, and this leads into your next point really well.
Yeah, yeah. So, right. So that's why we're here. So as Christians, we are called on and can be honest about death, because death is no longer our enemy. Jesus defeated it. Now it's just another part of the continuum of life from this one into the next. So we can talk about death without having to shirk in fear from it. And so one of the things that you can do, because you can talk about death, is plan for it. And that's a big part of what we're doing here this Lent. And this can be a great gift to your family to do this, right? If your people are already grieving, now you're thrown so many decisions that you have to make all rapidly, and you're just completely overwhelmed. It's so overwhelming. So to be able to lay out what your wishes are, at least can give some guidance to the bereaved on how to move forward. Picking things like hymns, psalms, readings can be incredibly meaningful for the bereaved during the liturgy, because they get to hear the words of God that you picked. They can hear from you beyond the grave in that, and what you believed about eternal life in the service, because you're the one who picked those readings.
You know, my mother wouldn't even pick out her casket or plan anything in advance. That's the hardest thing. I think it's harder than the funeral, is going and picking out where her body would lay on this earth.
Yeah.
Forever. It was just, I almost made it. I walked into that room and I almost made it.
If they're a day younger, it's even worse. I got called 2 hours after they picked her up, and I was on the phone with them for just as long. They got so many questions about anything and everything you could possibly ever think of. It's
So if we make our plans, is it something that we can then come to, say, you or Dean Andy, and have this in writing? Is there something?
Well, that's the plan.
Well, that's the
files. It goes right to the file.
It took already.
Good.
well, not you.
It's probably changed.
So week three, that we can write some of those documents down and put them on file here. That's the idea.
That's right. What about non-secular music? I obviously sound like anymore is horrible. I'm talking about, I'm a fan of classical music. What about something like that? It's the others just more hymns.
I don't do music, so I'm not going to answer that question.
I would allow it. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've had some strange requests from some people. It has to be fitting within the context of the church. I mean, weddings are the same way. You can't have something that's not. You get to animal.
So our music director, Dr. Lucas, is coming next week to talk about music specifically with the funeral.
There are things you can do and ways you can do it that can be used. Classical music is never generally an issue, unless it was something that was composed for a pagan feast or I'm looking at, I didn't think they do, Beatles music, to throw that in the service. Sure, why not? That's a little aside.
It wasn't at his funeral, though, mind you. It was exactly what Father James is talking about. It was at his celebration of life.
Oh, I mean, not every year was judged.
Yeah.
That picture of my
So it can be done anyway. I had a funeral when I was in Chicago, and the deceased was an alum of the University of Illinois, And his daughter said, "Can we play the Illinois flag song in the service?" And the reception was at the church. I said, "We're not going to do that in the service,
Yeah.
but I will play it on repeat for as long as you want at the reception."
Play at the reception and people sing along and all that.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's this week.
Good job.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Music. Thank you.
Yeah. So next week will be music, and then the week after that will be actual planning of the funeral, and then we'll look at advanced directives and preparing for end of life decisions, and then we'll look at plan to giving on the final week.